the untold, full, complete, very long history of China, from the very beginning to present. From myth to superpower, the birth of a civilization that would change the world. Before the world knew of the Great Wall, the Forbidden City, or the power of China's emperors, there was only an untamed land, vast, mysterious, and destined for greatness. This land gave rise to one of the longest surviving civilizations in human history, one that would endure 5,000 years of war, conquest, betrayal, and rebirth. The story of China is not just about emperors and dynasties. It is about the rise of a culture that would shape the course of human history. From the mythical rulers of ancient times to the modern skyscrapers of Beijing and Shanghai, China has stood as a beacon of power, innovation, and resilience. Now, prepare to embark on a journey through 5,000 years of ambition, betrayal, and triumph, the true full history of China. Chapter 1, The Dawn of Civilization, 5000-1600 BCE. The Yellow River and Early Settlements. Long before China became an empire, its first people lived along the Yellow River, Huanghe, and Yangtze River, two of the most important waterways in Chinese history. These rivers provided fertile land, allowing ancient humans to farm millet and rice, herd animals, and develop early societies. Archaeological evidence shows that early Yangshao, 5000-3000 BCE, and Longshan, 3000-1900 BCE cultures built small villages with pottery, silk making, and simple farming tools. These cultures formed the foundation of Chinese civilization, paving the way for tribal chieftains and warrior kings who would later rule. The legendary 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors. According to ancient Chinese mythology, civilization began under the rule of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, legendary rulers who brought knowledge to the people. These mythical figures include Fuxi, taught humanity how to fish, hunt, and create the first Chinese writing. Shang, the divine farmer, taught agriculture and the use of medicinal plants. Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, a legendary warrior king who united the tribes and invented key technologies like silk making, the compass, and early medicine. While there is no definitive proof that these rulers existed, their stories became deeply embedded in Chinese culture and influenced later dynasties. The mysterious Xia Dynasty, c. 2070-1600 BCE, the Xia Dynasty is traditionally considered China's first dynasty. Though no clear evidence of its existence has been found, historical texts describe it as a hereditary monarchy that ruled over early China. According to legend, the Xia kings controlled the Yellow River Valley, developing irrigation systems and bronze tools. However, as their rule grew corrupt, they were overthrown by a stronger dynasty, the Shang. Chapter 2, The Shang Dynasty, the Age of Bronze and Blood, 1600-1046 BCE, China's first true kingdom. The Shang Dynasty is the first fully confirmed ruling dynasty of China, reigning from 1600 to 1046 BCE. While the Xia Dynasty before it remained shrouded in legend, archaeological discoveries firmly established the Shang as a powerful kingdom with advanced technology, complex social hierarchy, and an elaborate religious system. Their rule centered around Anyang, their grand capital, a city of massive palaces, temples, and ritual sites. Unlike many early civilizations, the Shang did not use a centralized government to rule. Instead, regional warlords and noble families controlled different territories, all pledging loyalty to the king. This feudal-like system allowed the Shang to expand their dominance, but it also planted the seeds for future instability. The Oracle Bones, the birth of Chinese writing. One of the Shang dynasty's greatest legacies is the earliest known form of Chinese writing. Using turtle shells and animal bones, Shang priests would carve questions for the gods, then heat the bones until they cracked. The patterns of the cracks were interpreted as messages from the spiritual world, and the answers were carved into the bone. These oracle bones, discovered thousands of years later, became the key to deciphering ancient Chinese history. A society of warriors and rituals. The Shang were fierce warriors, their power resting on a highly organized military equipped with advanced bronze weapons, horse-drawn chariots, and massive armies. Weapons: they mastered bronze metallurgy, creating deadly spears, daggers, and battle axes. Chariots: the Shang were among the first in China to use horse-drawn chariots, giving them a major advantage in battle. Warrior kings: the king was also the supreme commander, leading troops into battle to expand their kingdom. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of Shang rule was their obsession with sacrifice. The Shang kings believed they were divine rulers who could communicate with ancestral spirits, and they performed elaborate human sacrifices to maintain favor with the gods. Thousands of servants, warriors, and prisoners were buried alive with deceased rulers to serve them in the afterlife. Even the massive Shang tombs uncovered today contain human remains and ritual objects, grim reminders of their religious fervor. The fall of the Shang. As time passed, the Shang rulers became increasingly corrupt and tyrannical. The last Shang king, King Zhou, is remembered in history as a cruel and extravagant ruler who ignored his people's suffering. He was said to torture subjects for amusement and waste resources on luxurious palaces and pleasure gardens while his kingdom suffered. In 1046 BCE, the Shang met their doom when a powerful vassal state, the Zhou, rebelled against them. Led by King Wu of Zhou, the Zhou army defeated the Shang forces at the Battle of Muye, marking the end of China's first confirmed dynasty. Chapter 3. The Zhou Dynasty, the Mandate of Heaven, and the Age of Philosophers, 1046 to 56 BCE. The fall of the Shang and the rise of the Zhou. In 1046 BCE, the mighty Qing Dynasty met its end at the hands of an ambitious vassal state, the Zhou. The Shang had ruled for centuries, but their kings had grown cruel, indulgent, and disconnected from the people. The last Shang ruler, King Zhou, not to be confused with the Zhou Dynasty, was infamous for his brutal punishments and extravagant lifestyle. It was said that King Zhou built a lake filled with wine and a forest of meat skewers, where he and his corrupt court reveled while the common people starved. His downfall came when King Wu of Zhou, a cunning and determined leader, rallied an army of rebellious Shang subjects and Zhou warriors. The Battle of Muyi was swift but decisive. The Shang army, composed of both devoted soldiers and reluctant conscripts, was shattered in a bloody battle. Shang King Zhou set his palace on fire and perished in the flames, marking the end of his dynasty. With the Shang gone, the Zhou dynasty took control of China, ruling for nearly 800 years, making it the longest-lasting dynasty in Chinese history. The Mandate of Heaven, a revolutionary concept. To justify their rule, the Zhou introduced a groundbreaking political and spiritual doctrine, the Mandate of Heaven. This powerful idea stated that 1. Heaven grants the right to rule to a just and virtuous leader. 2. A ruler must govern wisely and fairly to keep this mandate. 3. If a ruler becomes corrupt or incompetent, heaven will revoke its support, leading to natural disasters, peasant revolts, and ultimately, the ruler's overthrow. This was radical because it meant that the right to rule was not based on bloodline alone, but rather on moral legitimacy. It gave people a reason to rebel if their ruler was unjust, which would shape Chinese history for thousands of years. The Zhou system, a feudal kingdom. Unlike the highly centralized rule of the later Qin and Han dynasties, the Zhou governed through a feudal system. The king ruled from his capital, Haojing, but he distributed land and power to loyal lords and warlords. These noble families controlled different regions, swearing loyalty to the king in return for land and protection. This system allowed the Zhou to control vast territories, but it also sowed the seeds of division, as these powerful warlords would one day challenge the Zhou kings. The Golden Age of Philosophy, China's greatest thinkers. As the Zhou dynasty progressed, it became a time of immense intellectual and philosophical growth. The era between 770 BCE and 221 BCE is known as the 100 Schools of Thought, where some of China's most brilliant minds emerged. Confucius, the teacher of morality and order. Born in 551 BCE, Confucius, Kongfuzi, lived during a time of political chaos. He believed that China could only be saved if people followed a strict moral code. He taught that society must be based on filial piety, respect for elders, righteousness, and duty. His students later compiled his teachings into the Analects, which became the foundation of Confucianism, the dominant ideology of China for centuries. Laozi and Taoism, the way of nature. Laozi, or Lao Tzu, was a philosopher who believed that the key to happiness was harmony with nature. He taught that people should live simply, avoid conflict, and follow the natural flow of life, the Tao, or the way. His ideas formed the basis of Taoism, which influenced Chinese medicine, art, and spirituality for generations. Sun Tzu, the master of war. Sun Tzu, a brilliant military strategist, wrote The Art of War, one of the most influential books on strategy and warfare in history. His teachings emphasized deception, psychological warfare, and strategic thinking, principles still studied by military leaders today. These three figures, Confucius, Laozi, and Sun Tzu, shaped Chinese thought, governance, and warfare for over 2,000 years. The Warring States period, China's age of chaos, 475-221 BCE. By the 5th century BCE, the Zhou dynasty began to crumble. The feudal warlords who had once pledged loyalty to the Zhou king grew too powerful. By 475 BCE, China had fragmented into 7 rival kingdoms, each battling for supremacy. This period, known as the Warring States period, was one of the most violent and chaotic in Chinese history. The 7 states, Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Wei, and Zhou, engaged in endless warfare. Assassinations, betrayals, and strategic alliances became common. New weapons and tactics emerged, including crossbows, cavalry, and large-scale siege warfare. During this time, one kingdom, Qin, began to rise above the rest. Led by an ambitious young ruler, King Ying, the Qin state became militarily dominant, using ruthless efficiency and advanced tactics to crush its rivals. In 221 BCE, Qin defeated the last of its enemies, and King Ying proclaimed himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. Thus began the Qin Dynasty, marking the end of the Zhou era and the birth of a truly unified China. Chapter 4. The Qin Dynasty, China's first emperor, 221-206 BCE. The rise of Qin Shi Huang, the conqueror of China. For over 200 years, China had been locked in a brutal conflict known as the Warring States period. 7 powerful kingdoms fought for control, but only one would emerge victorious, the Qin. At the heart of Qin's rise was an ambitious and ruthless ruler, King Ying. He ascended to the throne of Qin at the age of 13 in 247 BCE, but it was his cunning prime minister, Lu Buwei, who initially controlled the kingdom. However, Ying grew impatient with being a mere figurehead. By the time he was 22, he had seized full power, eliminating anyone who stood in his way. Between 230 BCE and 221 BCE, Qin launched a military campaign that would change history. 230 BCE, Qin conquered the state of Han, the weakest of the warring states. 228 BCE, the kingdom of Zhou fell after years of relentless war. 225 BCE, Wei was crushed using advanced siege warfare tactics. 223 BCE, the mighty Chu was defeated, despite putting up fierce resistance. 222 BCE, the northern kingdom of Yuan was taken after the assassination attempt on Ying failed. 221 BCE, finally the kingdom of Qi surrendered without a fight, fearing Qin's overwhelming power. With all of China under his rule, Ying declared himself Qin Shi Huang, meaning the first emperor of Qin, ending the Warring States period and establishing the first unified Chinese empire. The unification of China, a ruthless but visionary emperor. Now that China was under one rule, Qin Shi Huang set out to centralize power. His reforms were brutal but effective, transforming China into a highly organized empire. 1. Standardization of writing, currency, and measurements. Before the Qin Dynasty, each region had different writing systems, currencies, and measurements, which made trade and administration difficult. Qin Shi Huang ordered the creation of a standardized script that became the basis of modern Chinese writing. He unified the currency, replacing regional coins with the Banliang coin. He standardized weights and measurements, ensuring uniformity across the empire. 2. The Great Wall of China, defending the empire. One of Qin Shi Huang's most ambitious projects was the construction of a massive defensive wall to protect China from northern nomadic invaders, the Xiongnu early Mongols. Hundreds of thousands of workers, including peasants, soldiers, and prisoners, were forced to build the Great Wall, which stretched over 3,000 miles. Conditions were harsh, and many died from exhaustion, starvation, or brutal treatment, earning it the nickname, the longest cemetery on Earth. Though not the same wall seen today, which was built later by the Ming Dynasty, Qin's wall laid the foundation for one of the greatest structures in history. 3. Suppression of knowledge, the burning of books and burying of scholars. Qin Shi Huang feared intellectual opposition. He hated Confucian scholars who criticized his harsh rule and called for a return to the past. In response, he took drastic measures. 213 BCE, he ordered the burning of books, destroying works of philosophy, history, and literature that did not align with his rule. 212 BCE, he buried alive 460 Confucian scholars, accusing them of spreading rebellion. His goal was to erase the past and ensure that his rule was the only history that mattered. The Terracotta Army, preparing for the afterlife. Qin Shi Huang was obsessed with immortality. He feared death so much that he sent explorers to search for the legendary elixir of life, but none succeeded. Instead, he commissioned one of the greatest archaeological wonders in history, the Terracotta Army. Over 8,000 life-size terracotta warriors were built to protect his tomb. Each soldier had unique facial features, detailed armor, and real weapons. Horses, chariots, and even entertainers were created to serve him in the afterlife. The army was buried underground, hidden from the world for over 2,000 years, until its discovery in 1974. Despite all his preparations, Qin Shi Huang could not escape death. The fall of the Qin Dynasty, rebellion and chaos. In 210 BCE, Qin Shi Huang died suddenly while traveling. His death was kept a secret for 2 months to prevent chaos. His body was transported in a cart filled with rotting fish, disguising the smell of his decaying corpse. Without his iron grip, the empire began to collapse rapidly. The corrupt rule of Qin Shi. Qin Shi Huang's weak and manipulative son, Qin Shi, took the throne. He was easily controlled by corrupt officials who raised taxes and executed anyone who questioned them. 2. The Chen Sheng and Wuguang Rebellion. In 209 BCE, 2 soldiers, Chen Sheng and Wuguang, were ordered to travel to the front lines. A storm delayed them, and since late arrivals were punished by death, they chose to rebel instead. Their rebellion inspired thousands of others to rise against the Qin. 3. The final collapse, the Battle of Zhou, 207 BCE. The Qin forces, led by General Zhang Han, faced rebel armies at Zhou. The rebels, led by Shang crushed the Qin army, sealing the fate of the dynasty. In 206 BCE, the Qin dynasty officially collapsed, and China was plunged into civil war once again. Legacy of the Qin dynasty. Despite its short rule, 15 years, the Qin dynasty shaped China's future forever. Qin Shi Huang was both a tyrant and a visionary. His rule was cruel, but his reforms created the foundation for a unified China. His Great Wall and Terracotta Army remain some of the most famous landmarks in the world. His system of standardization and centralized rule influenced all later dynasties. Though his empire fell, his impact would last for over 2,000 years. 5. The Han Dynasty, China's Golden Age, 206 BCE, 220 CE. The birth of the Han Empire, a peasant becomes emperor. With the collapse of the Qin dynasty in 206 BCE, China descended into chaos once again. Warlords and former rebel leaders fought for control, leading to a brutal civil war. At the heart of this conflict were 2 powerful figures. 1. Xiang, a ruthless and skilled general from a noble family. 2. Liu Bang, a former peasant and minor official who had risen through the ranks of the Qin army. Though Xiang Yu was the superior warrior, Liu Bang was a master of strategy and alliances. Over the next 4 years, the two fought in what became known as the Chu-Han Contention, 206-202 BCE, the Battle of Gaxia, 202 BCE, the defining moment. Xiang Yu's forces were surrounded by Liu Bang's army. Liu Bang used psychological warfare, having his troops sing the folk songs of Xiang Yu's homeland to break his morale. Defeated and humiliated, Xiang Yu committed suicide rather than surrender. With this victory, Liu Bang declared himself Emperor Gaozu of Han in 202 BCE, establishing the Han Dynasty, one of the greatest dynasties in Chinese history. The rule of Emperor Gaozu, from humble origins to supreme power. Unlike the harsh rule of the Qin Dynasty, Emperor Gaozu took a different approach. He lowered taxes to ease the suffering of the people. He reduced the harsh legal codes of the Qin, making punishments fairer. He adopted Confucian ideals, though he still kept some elements of Qin's centralized rule. However, his early reign was not easy. Former warlords and regional leaders refused to fully submit, and rebellions threatened the new empire. The Xiongnu threat, a test of the Han's strength to the north, the powerful Xiongnu nomads, early Mongols, raided Chinese lands. Their cavalry was superior, and they could attack swiftly before retreating into the steppes. In 200 BCE, Emperor Gaozu personally led an army against them, but was defeated and nearly captured. Instead of continuing the war, he chose diplomacy, offering the Xiongnu leaders Chinese princesses in marriage, silk, grain, and other riches as tribute. Though humiliating, this deal bought China time to grow stronger. By the time Emperor Gaozu died in 125 BCE, the Han Dynasty was firmly established. The expansion of the Han Dynasty, creating a superpower, the rise of Emperor Wu, 141-87 BCE, the warrior emperor. The Han Dynasty reached its peak under Emperor Wu, Wudi, often called Han Wudi, the martial emperor. He ruled for 54 years, making him one of the longest reigning emperors in Chinese history. His reign saw 1. The Han-Xiongnu Wars, defeating the nomadic threat. Han Wudi refused to keep paying tribute to the Xiongnu. Instead, he launched a series of massive military campaigns to push them back. By 119 BCE, the Han army, led by General Wei Qing and General Huo Kubing, crushed the Xiongnu forces and expanded Han control deep into Central Asia. 2. The opening of the Silk Road, China's first global trade network. One of Han Wudi's greatest achievements was establishing the Silk Road, a trade route connecting China to India, Persia, Rome, and beyond. Luxury goods like silk, porcelain, and spices flowed west. In return, China received horses, glassware, gold, and exotic goods. This made China incredibly wealthy and influential on the global stage. 3. Confucianism becomes the state philosophy. Though the Qin Dynasty tried to destroy Confucianism, Han Wudi revived it and made it the foundation of Chinese government. He established Confucian academies where scholars were trained to serve as officials. Examinations were introduced to select government officials based on merit, not birth. This system would shape Chinese society for over 2,000 years. The golden age of science, technology, and culture. The Han Dynasty was a powerhouse of innovation. Some of its greatest achievements included 1. The invention of paper, 105 CE. Before paper, people wrote on bamboo strips or silk, which were heavy and expensive. A Han official named Kai Lun invented a method of making paper from tree bark, hemp, and rags. This revolutionized writing and record-keeping, making books and documents more accessible. 2. The seismograph, detecting earthquakes. The Han scholar Zhang Heng created the world's first seismograph. It could detect earthquakes and even indicate which direction the tremor came from. 3. Advances in medicine, acupuncture and herbal medicine became widespread. Doctors wrote detailed medical texts recording illnesses and treatments. The decline of the Han Dynasty, corruption, and chaos. Despite its golden age, the Han Dynasty began to weaken in its later years due to 1. Corrupt officials and court intrigue. Eunuchs, influential palace officials, manipulated young emperors and seized power for themselves. Corrupt officials drained the treasury, leading to higher taxes. 2. The Yellow Turban Rebellion, 184 CE. Peasants, tired of corruption and heavy taxes, rose up under a Taoist sect known as the Yellow Turbans. The rebellion weakened the empire, making it vulnerable to outside attacks. 3. The rise of warlords, the end of Han rule. By 189 CE, the Han emperors had lost control and powerful warlords ruled different regions. The empire broke apart, leading to the legendary Three Kingdoms period 220-280 CE. Legacy of the Han Dynasty. Despite its fall, the Han Dynasty defined Chinese identity. Even today, the majority ethnic group in China is called Han Chinese. Established Confucianism as the core of Chinese society, created the Silk Road, forever changing global trade, invented paper, shaping the future of knowledge and communication. Even after its fall, future dynasties looked to the Han as a model of greatness. Chapter 6. The Three Kingdoms Era, 220-280 CE. A time of heroes and chaos. The fall of the Han Dynasty, the collapse of an empire by 189 CE, the once mighty Han Dynasty was in terminal decline. Corrupt officials, palace eunuchs, and warlords fought for power, while the emperor was reduced to a puppet figurehead. The situation worsened when the Yellow Turban Rebellion, 184 CE, a massive peasant uprising, destabilized the empire. Though the Han army crushed the rebellion, the damage was done. Regional warlords now controlled their own armies, leading to total fragmentation. By 220 CE, the Han Dynasty officially ended when Emperor Xian was forced to abdicate by Cao Pi, the son of the powerful warlord Cao. China was now divided into three rival kingdoms, each seeking absolute power. The three warlords who shaped an era. Three powerful leaders emerged, each claiming legitimacy to rule China. 1. Cao, the ruthless warlord. Of way brilliant but ruthless, Cao was a master strategist and politician. He controlled northern China, including the former Han capital, Luoyang. Though he ruled as a chancellor for the Han emperor, he was effectively the true ruler. 2. Liu Bei, the noble hero of Shui, distant relative of the Han royal family, Liu Bei sought to restore the fallen dynasty. He was righteous, humble, and beloved by his soldiers. Though he started with almost no land or army, he won followers through his loyalty and honor. 3. Sun Quan, the cunning king of Wu. Sun Quan controlled the rich lands of southern China, where his family had ruled for generations. Unlike the others, he was more pragmatic and focused on maintaining independence rather than outright conquest. The Battle of Red Cliffs, 208 CE, the most legendary naval battle in Chinese history. As Cao gained strength, he aimed to unite all of China under his rule. He gathered a massive army of over 200,000 men and advanced south toward the Yangtze River, hoping to crush his remaining rivals, Liu Bei and Sun Quan. The unexpected alliance, Shu and Wu, joined forces. Liu Bei and Sun Quan knew they couldn't defeat Cao alone, so they formed an unlikely alliance. Together, they assembled a smaller but highly skilled force under Zhou, Sun Quan's top general, a brilliant naval commander. Zhuge Liang, Liu Bei's military advisor and a legendary strategist. Cao's fatal mistakes. Despite his vast numbers, Cao's northern troops were inexperienced in naval warfare. His fleet was also tightly packed, making it vulnerable to fire attacks. The fire attack, a master stroke of strategy. The Allied forces sent a fleet of small ships pretending to surrender. As they approached, they set the ships on fire, sending a blazing inferno straight into Cao Cao's navy. The flames spread rapidly, turning his entire fleet into a sea of fire. Cao Cao's forces suffered a devastating defeat. Weakened, he was forced to retreat north, abandoning his dream of uniting China. The rise of the Three Kingdoms, a nation divided. The Kingdom of Wei, 220–265 CE, the strongest faction. After Cao Cao's death in 220 CE, his son Cao Pi seized the throne and declared himself Emperor of Wei. Though the largest of the three kingdoms, Wei was constantly at war with Shu and Wu. The Kingdom of Shu, 221–263 CE, the dream of restoring Han Liu Bei, declared himself Emperor of Shu, claiming he was the rightful Han ruler. He ruled from Chengdu, focusing on maintaining the Han legacy. However, his kingdom was the smallest and most fragile. The Kingdom of Wu, 229–280 CE, the southern power. Sun Quan formally established the Kingdom of Wu in 229 CE. He built a powerful naval force, ensuring his control over the Yangtze River. Unlike the others, Wu enjoyed relative stability and economic growth. The later conflicts, the decline of the Three Kingdoms. As the Three Kingdoms battled for supremacy, China entered an era of constant war and political intrigue. Liu Bei's last campaign, 221 CE. After the death of his sworn brother Guan Yu, Liu Bei launched a revenge campaign against Wu. He suffered a crushing defeat and died shortly after. The northern campaigns, 228–234 CE, Zhuge Liang, Liu Bei's top strategist, led a series of brilliant military campaigns against Wei. Though he outmaneuvered the enemy many times, he could never fully defeat them. He died in 234 CE, marking the beginning of Shu's decline. The fall of Shu, 263 CE, Wei launched a massive invasion of Shu, capturing its capital Chengdu. The kingdom collapsed, leaving only Wei and Wu. The end of the Three Kingdoms, the Qin Dynasty rises. By the 260s CE, Wei was still the strongest kingdom, but internal power struggles weakened it. A powerful general Sima Yi and his descendants seized control, overthrowing the Wei emperor in 265 CE. Sima Yan, the grandson of Sima Yi, declared himself emperor of the Qin Dynasty. The Qin army invaded Wu in 280 CE, marking the end of the Three Kingdoms era, the legacy of the Three Kingdoms. Though short-lived, the Three Kingdoms era left a profound cultural impact on China. 1. Romance of the Three Kingdoms, one of China's greatest epics, written by Luo Guanzhong in the 14th century. This novel immortalized the Three Kingdoms era. It became one of the most famous and influential books in Chinese history. Many heroes like Guan Yu, Zhuge Liang, and Zhao Yun became legendary figures. 2. Military Strategy and Politics. The Art of War by Sun Tzu and the strategies of Zhuge Liang were studied for centuries. Many Chinese and even Japanese warlords learned military tactics from this period. 3. The concept of balance of power. The struggle between Wei, Shu, and Wu shaped China's future political landscape. The idea of rival factions maintaining balance influenced later dynasties. Conclusion: the war-torn land reunified after nearly a century of war. China was finally reunified under the Qin Dynasty in 280 CE. However, peace would not last. Nomadic invasions and civil wars would soon plunge China into another dark age. Chapter 7. The Tang Dynasty, China's greatest age, 68907 CE. The collapse of the Sui Dynasty, the chaos. Before the Tang Dynasty rose to power, China suffered under the short-lived Sui Dynasty, 581–618 CE. Though the Sui rulers reunified China after centuries of division, their rule was brutally oppressive. Emperor Yang of Sui forced millions of peasants into backbreaking labor to build the Grand Canal and expand the Great Wall. His extravagant wars against Korea drained the treasury and led to mass revolts. By 618 CE, rebellions erupted across China. One of these rebel leaders was Yuan, a powerful general who overthrew the Sui and established the Tang Dynasty. The rise of the Tang Dynasty. A new golden age begins. The founding emperor, Yuan, Emperor Gaozu, 618-626 CE. Yuan established the Tang Dynasty and restored stability. He reduced taxes, reformed government, and won the support of the people. However, he was soon overthrown by his ambitious son, Li Shimin. Emperor Taizong, Li Shimin, the greatest emperor, 626-649 CE. Li Shimin, who became Emperor Taizong, was one of the greatest rulers in Chinese history. He expanded the empire, conquering vast lands in Central Asia, Korea, and Vietnam. He established the Imperial examination system, allowing talented men, not just nobles, to serve in government. He embraced religious tolerance, allowing Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism to flourish. His reign was a period of peace, economic growth, and cultural brilliance. Under his rule, China became the most powerful empire in the world. The height of the Tang Dynasty, the most powerful nation on earth. Chang'an, the greatest city in the world. The Tang capital, Chang'an, was a bustling metropolis of over 1 million people, unmatched in size, wealth, and diversity. It was the center of global trade, welcoming merchants from Persia, India, Arabia, and Byzantium. It had grand palaces, massive marketplaces, and over 100 Buddhist temples. Poets, scholars, and musicians flocked to the city, making it a hub of creativity. The Silk Road, China's link to the world. The Tang dynasty controlled the Silk Road, connecting China to the Middle East and Europe. Chinese silk, porcelain, and tea were exported to distant lands. Foreign merchants brought spices, jewels, and exotic goods to China. Buddhism, brought from India, flourished and influenced Chinese art and philosophy. The first and only female emperor, Wu Zetian, 690-705 CE, a woman who defied tradition. Wu Zetian was a concubine who rose to become China's only female emperor. She was brilliant, ruthless, and ambitious, eliminating her rivals to seize power. She declared herself Empress Regnant of China, ruling in her own name. She strengthened the empire, expanded the civil service exams, and promoted Buddhism. Though her rule was controversial, she proved that a woman could rule China as effectively as any man. The peak of culture, the Tang Golden Age of poetry and art. The greatest poets in Chinese history. The Tang era was the golden age of poetry, producing legendary poets like Li Bai, a romantic poet who wrote about nature, wine, and adventure. Du Fu, a poet who captured the struggles of war and hardship. Wang Wei, a poet known for his serene, Buddhist-influenced verses. Innovations in art and science. The Tang Dynasty saw remarkable achievements in block printing, which led to the first printed books, advances in astronomy, including the world's most accurate star charts, new medical discoveries, including acupuncture techniques still used today, the An Lushan Rebellion, 755-763 CE, the beginning of the end, the empire in crisis. By the mid-8th century, the Tang Empire was at its peak, but it had become too large to control. An Lushan, a powerful general of mixed Sogdian and Turkic origin, led a massive rebellion against the Tang government. His forces captured Chang'an, forcing the Tang Emperor Xuanzong to flee the capital. Though the rebellion was eventually crushed, it devastated the empire, leading to the deaths of millions of people, the weakening of Tang military power, the loss of Silk Road territories to foreign invaders, the decline of the Tang dynasty, the final years' corruption and weak rulers. Later Tang emperors were weak and controlled by court eunuchs. Regional military governors, warlords, became more powerful than the emperor. The rise of the Huang Chao Rebellion, 874-884 CE. A brutal peasant uprising led by Huang Chao burned cities to the ground. Millions died, further weakening the empire. The fall of the Tang, 907 CE. China falls into chaos again. The last Tang emperor was overthrown in 907 CE. China split into warring kingdoms, entering another period of fragmentation known as the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period, 907-960 CE. The Tang Dynasty's legacy, why it still matters today. Though it ended in violence and collapse, the Tang Dynasty left a lasting impact on China and the world. 1. The greatest cultural golden age in Chinese history. Chang'an became the blueprint for future Chinese cities. 2. Expansion of Buddhism and trade. Chinese Buddhism reached its peak, spreading to Japan and Korea. The Silk Road made China a global center of trade. 3. The foundation for future dynasties. The Tang civil service system became the model for future Chinese governments. Later dynasties like the Song and Ming built upon Tang achievements. Conclusion: the end of an era, the beginning of a new one. After ruling for nearly 300 years, the Tang dynasty fell, but its influence lived on. The next great dynasty, the Song dynasty, 960-1279 CE, would build on its achievements and take China into a new age of prosperity and invention. Chapter 8. The Song dynasty, the Age of Innovation, 960-1279 CE. The rise of the Song dynasty. After the collapse of the powerful Tang dynasty, China was thrown into a period of division known as the Five Dynasties and Ten Kingdoms period, 907-960 CE. Warlords ruled different regions, and China lacked central leadership. In 960 CE, a brilliant general named Zhou Guangyin, the commander of the later Zhou army, staged a bloodless coup and declared himself Emperor Taizu, founding the Song dynasty. He quickly moved to unify China, ending the chaos and bringing about a new golden age. Political and social structure. Unlike previous dynasties, which heavily relied on military expansion, the Song prioritized administration, culture, and economic growth. Civil service and the examination system. The Song expanded the imperial examination system, making government positions based on merit rather than noble birth. Scholars, known as scholar officials, were chosen through rigorous Confucian exams, ensuring a highly educated bureaucracy. This system allowed social mobility where commoners could rise to power through intelligence and hard work. Urbanization and society. The Song dynasty saw a massive population boom, reaching over 100 million people. Cities like Kaifeng and Hangzhou became global trade hubs, filled with bustling markets, theaters, and cultural institutions. A distinct middle class emerged, including merchants, artisans, and scholars. Technological and scientific advancements. The Song dynasty is often called China's Renaissance due to its rapid advancements in science, technology, and the arts. The Four Great Inventions. During the Song era, China perfected several groundbreaking inventions. 1. Gunpowder, first used in fire lances and grenades, leading to the development of rockets and firearms. 2. The compass revolutionized navigation, allowing Chinese merchants and explorers to dominate sea trade. 3. Printing, woodblock and movable type, led to the mass production of books, spreading knowledge across China. 4. Paper money, the world's first banknotes, replacing cumbersome coins and facilitating large-scale trade. Engineering and architecture. The Song built advanced bridges and multi-storied wooden pagodas, some surviving to this day. Engineers developed the water clock and advanced hydraulic systems for irrigation, economic growth, and the Silk Road. The Song economy was one of the strongest in the world, with booming trade across land and sea. The Maritime Silk Road. Unlike previous dynasties that focused on land trade, the Song developed powerful naval fleets and expanded the Maritime Silk Road. Ports like Quanzhou and Guangzhou connected China with India, Arabia, and Africa, bringing vast wealth. Tea, porcelain, and silk. The Song exported high-quality porcelain, china, silk, and tea making these luxury goods highly sought after in the Middle East and Europe. Military challenges and the rise of the Jurchens. Despite its economic and cultural greatness, the Song struggled militarily. The Northern Song, 960–1127 CE, and the Jurchen invasion, the Song constantly fought against nomadic tribes like the Khitans and Tanguts in the north. In 1127, the Jurchens, a powerful northern people, conquered the Song capital Kaifeng, forcing the royal family to flee south. The Southern Song, 1127–1279 CE, the final stand. The Song retreated south and established their new capital in Hangzhou. They built a powerful navy, using flame-throwing ships and early gunpowder weapons to defend against invaders. Despite their resilience, the Song would soon face their greatest enemy yet, the Mongols. The Mongol conquest and the fall of the Song, 1279 CE, Genghis Khan, and the Mongol expansion. In the early 1200s, Genghis Khan, the ruthless leader of the Mongols, conquered much of Asia, including northern China. Kublai Khan in the final defeat, 1279 CE. By 1279, Kublai Khan, Genghis's grandson, led the Mongol army in a full-scale invasion of the Song dynasty. Despite the Song's advanced navy, the Mongols overpowered them, marking the first time China was fully ruled by foreign conquerors. With that, the Song dynasty ended, and the Mongols established the Yuan dynasty. Chapter 9. The Yuan dynasty, Mongol rule in China, 1279–1368 CE, the rise of the Mongols, Genghis Khan's vision. In the early 13th century, the Mongols, a nomadic warrior people from the steppes of Mongolia, emerged as a terrifying force under the leadership of Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes through diplomacy, warfare, and sheer brutality. He led his armies to conquer China's northern territories, devastating cities with tactics that combined speed, deception, and psychological warfare. The Mongols continued their rampage, eventually creating the largest land empire in history, stretching from China to Eastern Europe. Kublai Khan and the Conquest of China. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his grandson Kublai Khan set his sights on completing the conquest of China. The fall of the Southern Song, year 1279 CE. The Southern Song dynasty resisted Mongol rule for decades, relying on their powerful navy and well-defended cities. However, Kublai Khan, a brilliant strategist, adapted to naval warfare, developing powerful warships and using Mongol archers with deadly precision. In 1279, the Battle of Yamen marked the end of the Song dynasty as the last Song emperor. A child drowned himself rather than be captured. With that, Kublai Khan became the first foreign emperor of China, establishing the Yuan dynasty. Mongol rule in China, the Yuan dynasty, 1279–1368 CE. Unlike previous Chinese dynasties, the Mongols ruled as outsiders, bringing major changes to Chinese society. A new social order, Kublai Khan divided society into a rigid class system. 1. Mongols, the ruling elite. 2. Central Asians and Persians, trusted allies and administrators. 3. Northern Chinese, somewhat privileged but not in power. 4. Southern Chinese, the lowest class viewed with suspicion. This led to resentment among the Chinese, who were now second-class citizens in their own land. The expansion of trade, the Silk Road revival. Kublai Khan reopened and protected the Silk Road, ensuring safe trade between China, the Middle East, and Europe. Marco Polo, a Venetian merchant, traveled to China and spent 17 years at Kublai Khan's court. His book introduced China's wonders to Europe, inspiring later explorers. Cultural exchange and innovations. Chinese technology, gunpowder, printing, and paper money spread to Europe, accelerating the Renaissance. Persian and Islamic influences reshaped Chinese art, architecture, and medicine. The Grand Canal and Beijing's transformation. Kublai Khan moved the capital to Beijing and rebuilt the Grand Canal, making it the world's longest waterway to ensure food supplies reached the north. The decline of the Yuan dynasty. Despite its power, the Yuan dynasty began to crumble in the 14th century due to several key factors: corruption and weak leadership. After Kublai Khan's death in 1294, his successors were weak and incompetent, leading to palace intrigue and assassinations. Mongol rulers lived lavishly while raising taxes on the Chinese, fueling discontent. Natural disasters and famine. A series of devastating floods, droughts, and famines hit China, leading to widespread suffering. Many saw these disasters as signs that the Mongols had lost the mandate of heaven, justifying rebellion. The Red Turban Rebellion and the Fall of the Mongols, 1368 CE. In the 1350s, a secret Chinese rebel group called the Red Turban Army launched an uprising against the Mongols. Led by a peasant warrior named Zhou Yuanzhang, the rebels overthrew the Yuan dynasty in 1368. Zhou Yuanzhang declared himself Emperor Hongwu, founding the Ming Dynasty and restoring Chinese rule. Chapter 10, The Ming Dynasty, The Great Revival, 1368-1644 CE. The rise of the Ming Dynasty, a peasant becomes emperor. After nearly a century of Mongol rule, China was in ruins. The people had suffered under heavy taxation, corrupt officials, and constant natural disasters. The once proud Chinese civilization had been treated as second-class citizens in their own land. But out of this suffering rose an unlikely hero, Zhou Yuanzhang, a poor orphan-turned-monk who would overthrow the Mongols and restore Chinese rule. Born into poverty, Zhou Yuanzhang joined the Red Turban Rebellion in the 1350s. A brilliant strategist, he defeated Mongol armies and took Nanjing as his base. In 1368, he led a final assault on Beijing, forcing the last Yuan emperor to flee back to Mongolia. With the Mongols gone, Zhou Yuanzhang declared himself Emperor Hongwu, founding the Ming Dynasty, meaning brilliant dynasty. For the first time in nearly a century, China was ruled by the Chinese once again. Emperor Hongwu, the ruthless reformer, 1368-1398 CE. Once in power, Hongwu sought to restore China's greatness, but he ruled with an iron fist. 1. The reconstruction of China. He rebuilt the farmlands, distributing land to peasants and boosting food production. To prevent Mongol-style corruption, he abolished the powerful prime minister position and centralized power around the emperor. The Great Wall was strengthened to prevent another foreign invasion. 2. The persecution of corruption. Hongwu became paranoid about traitors, leading to brutal purges. Tens of thousands of officials were executed or exiled for suspected disloyalty. Despite his harsh rule, China prospered and stability returned. The Yongle Emperor in the Age of Exploration, 1402-1424 CE. After Hongwu's death, his son, Zhu Di the Yongle Emperor, took the throne by force, overthrowing his nephew. Unlike his father, Yongle was an ambitious emperor who wanted to expand China's influence. 1. The construction of Beijing and the Forbidden City, Yongle, moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing. He ordered the construction of the Forbidden City, an imperial palace of 9,000 rooms, symbolizing Ming power. 2. Zhenghe's Great Voyages, 1405-1433 CE. The Ming Dynasty launched the greatest naval expeditions in history under Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim eunuch explorer. From 1405 to 1433, Zheng He led 7 massive voyages across the Indian Ocean, reaching Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and even Africa. His fleet included 300 ships and 28,000 crew members, dwarfing European voyages. He brought back exotic goods, giraffes from Africa, and established China's dominance over global trade. However, after Yongle's death, China suddenly stopped exploring, believing it had nothing more to learn from the outside world. The Ming Golden Age, Economy, Arts, and Literature. The Ming era was a time of economic prosperity and artistic brilliance. 1. The economy and trade boom. Porcelain, silk, and tea exports made China the richest country in the world. The Ming developed factories producing ceramics and textiles on a massive scale. Silver from Spanish colonies in the Americas flooded China, fueling a money-based economy. 2. The rise of Chinese literature. Some of China's greatest novels were written during the Ming era, including Journey to the West, the legendary tale of the Monkey King, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a dramatic retelling of China's civil wars, The Plum in the Golden Vase, a scandalous novel reflecting Ming society. 3. The strengthening of the Great Wall. Fearing another Mongol invasion, the Ming massively rebuilt the Great Wall, giving it its modern appearance. The decline of the Ming Dynasty, corruption, rebellion, and the Manchu invasion. Despite its greatness, the Ming Dynasty began to weaken in the 1600s. 1. Corruption and mismanagement. Weak emperors neglected government affairs, leaving power in the hands of corrupt eunuchs. The tax burden fell heavily on peasants, leading to unrest. 2. Natural disasters and the peasant rebellions. Droughts, floods, and locust plagues devastated agriculture. In the 1630s, the Ming government couldn't pay its armies, leading to widespread desertions. In 1644, a rebel leader, Li Zicheng, captured Beijing, ending Ming rule. 3. The Manchu Conquest and the rise of the Qing Dynasty. The Ming's former allies, the Manchus, took advantage of the chaos. Manchu armies invaded from the north, defeated Li Zicheng, and took control of China. In 1644, the Manchu leader Shunji became the first Qing emperor, marking the beginning of China's last dynasty. Chapter 11. The Qing Dynasty, China's last empire, 1644-1912 CE. The rise of the Qing Dynasty, the Manchus take China. The fall of the Ming Dynasty in 1644 plunged China into chaos. The rebel leader Li Zicheng had overthrown the Ming but lacked the strength to rule. Seizing this opportunity, the Manchus, a powerful nomadic people from northeast China, invaded and established the Qing Dynasty. The Manchu leader, Shunji Emperor, declared himself the ruler of China. Manchu forces crushed the last Ming loyalists, ending nearly 300 years of Ming rule. The Manchus forced Chinese men to wear the Q hairstyle, a shaved forehead with a long braid, symbolizing submission to Qing rule. Despite being foreign rulers, the Qing adopted Chinese traditions to legitimize their rule. They restored Confucian governance, expanded China's borders, and created one of the most powerful empires in history. The Golden Age of the Qing, 1680-1800, expansion and prosperity. The Qing reached their peak under three great emperors. 1. The Kangxi Emperor, 1661-1722, China's longest reigning emperor. One of China's greatest emperors, Kangxi ruled for 61 years. He expanded China's territory, conquering Taiwan, Mongolia, and Tibet. A brilliant scholar, he patronized science, arts, and literature, leading to a cultural renaissance. 2. The Yongzheng Emperor, 1722-1735, the reformer. Strengthened central authority and crushed corruption, enforced economic reforms that stabilized the empire. 3. The Qianlong Emperor, 1735-1796, the height of Qing power. China's territory reached its greatest extent, including Xinjiang, Tibet, and Taiwan. The economy boomed, and Chinese arts, including porcelain and silk, became world famous. However, Qianlong's later years saw corruption, overspending, and rebellion, leading to decline. The decline of the Qing Dynasty, 1800-1912, internal chaos and foreign invasions. Despite its early success, the Qing faced serious challenges in the 19th century. 1. The Opium Wars, 1839-1860, China versus Britain. British merchants smuggled opium into China, causing a drug crisis. The Qing banned opium, but Britain declared war to protect its drug trade. After losing both opium wars, China was forced to sign unfair treaties, giving Britain Hong Kong and opening ports to foreign control. 2. The Taiping Rebellion, 1850-1864, 20 million dead, led by Hong Xiuquan, a failed scholar who claimed to be the brother of Jesus Christ. The Taiping army captured Nanjing, nearly overthrowing the Qing. The rebellion was brutally crushed, but it weakened Qing authority and killed 20-30 million people. 3. The Self-Strengthening Movement, 1861-1895, a failed reform. Some Qing officials tried to modernize China's military and industry. However, corruption and conservative resistance stopped real progress. 4. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894-1895, humiliating defeat. Japan, once a weaker state, defeated China and took Taiwan. This shocked China and proved the Qing were too weak to defend the nation. 5. The Boxer Rebellion, 1899-1901, the final blow. A secret group called the Boxers attacked foreigners and Christians, believing martial arts could make them bulletproof. Foreign powers crushed the rebellion and occupied Beijing, humiliating the Qing further. The fall of the Qing Dynasty, 1911-1912, the end of Imperial China. By the early 1900s, China was in political, economic, and military ruin. The people demanded an end to Qing rule. The Xinhai Revolution, 1911, led by Sun Yat-sen, revolutionaries overthrew the Qing Dynasty. The last emperor, Puyi, was forced to abdicate in 1912, ending over 2,000 years of imperial rule. China was now a republic, but its future remained uncertain. With the Qing's fall, China entered a new, turbulent era of warlords, revolutions, and foreign invasions. Chapter 12. The Republic of China and the Civil War, 1912-1949, Chaos, Revolution, and the Struggle for Power. At the end of Imperial China, a new republic is born, 1912. For over 2,000 years, China had been ruled by emperors, but in 1912 everything changed. The Qing Dynasty collapsed, and for the first time in history, China became a republic. However, instead of peace, this new era brought chaos, warlords, and a bloody civil war. The revolution was led by Sun Yat-sen, a visionary leader who wanted China to become a modern, democratic nation. The last emperor, Puyi, was forced to abdicate, ending the Qing Dynasty. In 1912, Sun Yat-sen became the first president of the Republic of China. But this new government was weak and unstable, and soon China fell into a power struggle between warlords, nationalists, and communists. The warlord era, 1916-1928, China divided. In 1916, China's first president, Yuan tried to declare himself emperor. His failure threw the country into chaos, leading to the rise of warlords, regional military leaders who ruled their own territories like kings. China became divided with different warlords controlling different provinces. The central government in Beijing had no real power. Ordinary people suffered under heavy taxes, banditry, and endless battles between warlords. Amid this chaos, two powerful political forces emerged. One, the Kuomintang, KMT, the nationalists, led by Sun Yat-sen, wanted to unify China and create a strong government. 2. The Communist Party of China, CPC. The Communists, founded in 1921, wanted to establish a socialist state like the Soviet Union. The Northern Expedition, 1926-1928, the nationalists take control. After Sun Yat-sen's death in 1925, leadership of the KMT passed to Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang launched the Northern Expedition, a military campaign to defeat the warlords and unify China. By 1928, the KMT had seized Beijing, and Chiang Kai-shek declared himself leader of China. For the first time in decades, China was mostly united. But another crisis loomed, the conflict between the nationalists and communists. The Chinese Civil War begins, 1927-1937, nationalists versus communists. In 1927, Chiang Kai-shek turned against the communists, launching a brutal purge known as the Shanghai Massacre. Thousands of communists were executed, imprisoned, or forced into hiding. The Communists, led by Mao Zedong, escaped into the countryside and began organizing a peasant revolution. The Long March, 1934-1935, a legendary communist escape. The KMT surrounded the Communists, forcing them to flee on a 5,000-mile journey through mountains, rivers, and deserts. Out of 86,000 communists, only 8,000 survived. Mao Zedong emerged as the undisputed leader of the Communist Party. Though the Communists had suffered terrible losses, they gained the support of millions of peasants, setting the stage for a future comeback. The Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937-1945, China versus Japan. Just as China was torn apart by civil war, a new enemy struck from the east, Japan. The invasion of China, 1937. In 1937, Japan launched a full-scale invasion of China, starting with the Marco Polo Bridge incident. The Japanese army quickly seized Beijing, Shanghai, and Nanjing. In Nanjing, Japanese forces massacred over 300,000 civilians, committing unspeakable atrocities in what became known as the Rape of Nanjing. The temporary truce, nationalists and communists unite. Under pressure from the people, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong agreed to a temporary alliance to fight Japan. The nationalists fought major battles, while the communists waged guerrilla warfare behind enemy lines. Despite fierce resistance, China struggled against Japan's superior military. It wasn't until 1945, when the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that Japan finally surrendered. The Civil War resumes, 1945-1949, the rise of Communist China. With Japan defeated, the nationalists and communists immediately resumed fighting for control of China. The fall of the nationalists. The nationalists were weakened after years of war. Their government was corrupt, and inflation was out of control. The communists, now stronger than ever, had the support of millions of peasants. In 1949, Mao Zedong's Red Army captured Beijing and Shanghai, forcing Chiang Kai-shek to flee to Taiwan. The communist victory, the People's Republic of China, is born. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong stood in Tiananmen Square and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. The nationalists retreated to Taiwan, establishing a rival government. Meanwhile, on the mainland, China was now under communist rule, and its transformation was just beginning. Chapter 13, The Mao Era and the Transformation of China, 1949-1976. The Rise of Mao Zedong, the Birth of Communist China. On October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong stood in Tiananmen Square and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China, PRC. After decades of war, foreign invasions, and internal strife, China was finally under a strong, centralized government. However, the transition to communism would be painful, brutal, and marked by some of the deadliest policies in human history. The nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan, where they established a rival government, the Republic of China, ROC. Mao and the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, took complete control of the mainland, vowing to rebuild the country. China's new government was based on Marxist-Leninist principles, with Mao as the supreme leader. While millions celebrated, the coming decades would bring radical social reforms, economic disasters, and violent political purges. Mao's early reforms, 1949-1957, rebuilding a war-torn nation. After years of war and instability, China was in ruins. Mao's first goal was to restore order and rebuild the economy. 1. Land reforms, the destruction of the landlords. Mao redistributed land from wealthy landlords to poor peasants. Millions of landlords were executed or sent to labor camps as Mao encouraged peasants to rise up against their oppressors. Agriculture improved, but the brutal purges created deep resentment. 2. The suppression of counter-revolutionaries. 1950-1952, Mao launched a massive purge of political opponents, targeting former nationalists, intellectuals, and anyone suspected of disloyalty. Over 2 million people were executed, and millions more were imprisoned in labor camps. Laogai. 3. The Korean War, 1950-1953, China versus the USA. 3. The Korean War, 1950-1953, China versus the USA. In 1950, China entered the Korean War to support communist North Korea against South Korea and the United States. Chinese troops, known as the People's Volunteer Army, pushed U.S. forces back, leading to a stalemate. The war ended in 1953 with a ceasefire, boosting Mao's reputation as a strong leader. With China stabilizing, Mao launched his most ambitious and disastrous policies yet. The Great Leap Forward, 1958-1962, a catastrophic failure. In 1958, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward, a radical plan to industrialize China and surpass Western economies. It ended in one of the deadliest famines in human history. 1. The creation of communes. Private farms were abolished, and peasants were forced into huge collective farms, communes. People were ordered to melt down metal tools to create steel, leading to widespread waste and economic chaos. 2. The Great Chinese Famine, 1959-1961, 30 million dead. Food production collapsed due to poor planning, false reports, and bad weather. The government continued exporting grain, while millions starved to death. Some reports describe cases of cannibalism in the worst-hit areas. By 1962, the Great Leap Forward was declared a failure, and Mao temporarily lost influence within the CCP. However, he was not done yet. The Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, chaos and purge, fearing that China's government was becoming too bureaucratic and capitalist. Mao launched the Cultural Revolution to purge enemies and reinforce communist ideology. 1. The rise of the Red Guards, Mao's teenage army. Mao called on students and young revolutionaries to attack counter-revolutionaries in schools, workplaces, and the government. These Red Guards rampaged through cities, destroying cultural relics, burning books, and humiliating intellectuals. Professors, scientists, and officials were beaten, imprisoned, or executed. 2. The destruction of China's culture. Ancient temples, books, and priceless artifacts were destroyed as part of Mao's anti-traditionalist movement. Traditional Confucian values were condemned, and loyalty to Mao was considered the highest virtue. 3. Mao's personality. Cult. Mao became worshipped like a god, with his Little Red Book, of quotes becoming required reading for all Chinese citizens. Massive rallies were held in his honor, and any criticism of him was punishable by death. By the early 1970s, China was in chaos, and even Mao realized the Cultural Revolution had gone too far. However, his health was failing, and China's future was uncertain. The death of Mao Zedong, 1976, the end of an era. On September 9, 1976, Mao Zedong died at the age of 82, marking the end of one of the most turbulent periods in Chinese history. 1. China in ruins. The economy was devastated, with millions dead or displaced. The education system was destroyed, leaving an entire generation uneducated. China was internationally isolated, seen as a chaotic and unpredictable country. 2. The struggle for power. After Mao's death, his supporters, including the Gang of Four, led by Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, tried to maintain power. However, they were arrested and put on trial by Deng Xiaoping, who would lead China into a new era of reform and modernization. Chapter 14. The Rise of Modern China, 1976-present. From Isolation to Global Superpower, the Post-Mao Era. A Nation in Transition, 1976-1989. With Mao Zedong's death in 1976, China stood at a crossroads. Decades of political purges, economic mismanagement, and social upheaval had left the country in ruins. The question now was, what next? 1. The fall of the Gang of Four, 1976 and 1978, ending the Cultural Revolution. After Mao's death, his radical supporters, including his wife, Jiang Qing, and 3 top officials, the Gang of Four, tried to hold on to power. However, moderate leaders, backed by the military, arrested them in 1976. This officially ended the Cultural Revolution, and the nation began shifting away from Mao's radical policies. 2. The rise of Deng Xiaoping, 1978, the architect of modern China. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping emerged as China's new leader. Unlike Mao, Deng believed that economic progress was more important than ideology. He introduced the famous slogan, "It doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice." This meant China would now embrace capitalism while maintaining a communist government. Deng's leadership transformed China into the economic powerhouse it is today. Deng Xiaoping's reforms, the economic miracle, 1978-1992. Deng's policies led to one of the fastest economic transformations in world history. 1. The Open Door Policy, 1978. China joins the global economy. Deng ended China's isolation and invited foreign businesses and investments. Special Economic Zones, SEZs, were created in cities like Shenzhen, where companies could operate with capitalist policies. These policies kick-started China's manufacturing boom. 2. Agricultural reforms. The end of communes. Farmers were allowed to own land again and sell their crops for profit. Agricultural production skyrocketed, and millions of peasants escaped poverty. 3. Industrial and technological growth. China focused on building factories, improving infrastructure, and modernizing its industries. The economy grew at an unprecedented rate of 10% per year. Millions of Chinese people moved from villages to booming cities to work in factories. By the late 1980s, China was no longer a struggling communist state. It was a rising economic powerhouse. However, not everyone was happy with the government's strict control. China becomes a global superpower, 1992 present. After Deng Xiaoping's retirement in 1992, China continued on its path to economic and technological dominance. 1. The 2000s, China becomes the world's factory. China became the world's largest manufacturer, producing everything from electronics to clothing. The country's GDP skyrocketed, lifting hundreds of millions out of poverty. Cities like Shanghai, Beijing, and Shenzhen became global financial centers. 2. China's rise in technology and innovation companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent became global tech giants. China invested heavily in AI, 5G, and electric vehicles, competing with the U.S. and Europe. 3. The Belt and Road Initiative, 2013, China's global expansion. In 2013, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, investing trillions in infrastructure projects across Asia, Africa, and Europe. This made China a dominant global power, but also led to tensions with Western countries. 4. China versus the U.S. The new Cold War. In recent years, tensions between China and the U.S. have escalated over trade, military expansion, and technology. The South China Sea dispute, the Taiwan issue, and the U.S.-China trade war have increased global tensions. 5. The COVID-19 pandemic, 2019-2023, global impact. The COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan 2019 led to global lockdowns and economic crises. China's strict zero-COVID policy sparked protests and economic slowdown. In 2023, China fully reopened, but challenges remain. The future of China. Where is the nation headed? Today, China is the world's second-largest economy and a leading global power. However, challenges remain. Economic slowdown due to a declining birth rate and aging population. Rising tensions with Taiwan and the West, strict government control and censorship versus growing calls for freedom. Will China continue its rise or face internal struggles like in the past? Only time will tell. Conclusion: the epic story of China. From its ancient dynasties to its modern superpower status, China's history is one of innovation, conflict, resilience, and transformation. It has survived invasions, revolutions, and economic crises. It has created some of the world's greatest inventions. And today, It stands at the center of global politics and economics. China's story is not over yet, and the next chapters of its history will shape the future of the world.